Well, Margaret, as we heard in your piece, White House officials say President Trump is considering a tax on imports from Mexico to pay for the wall that could range from 5 to 20%. How is that news being received so far by lawmakers? And theoretically, who would it impact most?
Well, Elaine, this theoretical tax, which sounds similar to something that's being floated as part of a border adjustment tax proposal from House Speaker Paul Ryan, would essentially try to incentivize American companies and companies abroad to produce goods here in the United States rather than making them in places where the cost of labor is cheaper, like Mexico or China. So this tax would essentially hurt you if you're producing your goods outside the country and then trying to sell them here in the United States. So lawmakers saw this as perhaps a sign that Donald Trump is listening into things like the Republican establishment, so to speak, like the House Speaker is looking at. But the White House later then told us, no, we're not ready to endorse a plan. This is something we are saying we are open to. It's a buffet of options, as the chief of staff said to us. And in fact, that tax rate could be a range of things. They point out, because as you can imagine, American corporations would say, whoa, that's going to hurt our business. How are you making it cheaper for me to be able to afford that? They argue this is part of a bigger comprehensive tax reform package that would lower the corporate tax rate to somehow make this work. This would really impact, say, apparel manufacturers or companies, retailers that make goods outside the United States and buy items outside the United States.
Yeah. All right, Margaret, also during his speech at the GOP retreat in Philadelphia Thursday, President Trump referred to NAFTA as a terrible deal. In thinking about what the president can actually do, has the administration signaled an arrangement they feel would be more advantageous to American business?
So the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, which President Trump referred to there, basically helps America trade goods over its borders to the north and south, Canada and Mexico. And the president has said he wants to renegotiate. Now he's starting to signal with this tension with Mexico that maybe he's more interested in pushing for a bilateral trade deal. And he said today at that retreat, a trade deal that would perhaps have a 30-day termination clause, and America could walk away from it. So it sounds like he's really floating a lot of ideas, throwing a lot of things out there and saying we're open to it all, but we're not ready to commit to any of it quite yet. As you can imagine, diplomatically, that's sometimes difficult. Things get lost in translation, and particularly for Mexican officials who were here yesterday when when President Trump made that announcement about the border wall. Things have consequences, and saying and making that announcement without any heads up to those diplomats really caused some hurt feelings.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard enough sometimes for people in America to get a sense and discern precisely what it is that President Trump is saying, much less
for reporters.
Right, and for reporters. And as you said, things can get lost in translation. So it'll be fascinating to watch that relationship with Mexico. But I also want to ask you, Margaret, about the news out of the State Department. Several top officials have departed. How does that further complicate, or does it, President Trump's agenda, given that he's going to be proceeding without experienced key advisors?
Right. Well, one big job opening right now, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, still has not been confirmed by the Congress to run the State Department. So not only do you not have a boss in charge of the State Department right now, you do have a political appointee who's filling in, and some career diplomats still there. To have management, names who are very much establishment, who've been there for decades helping to run the organization, people like Pat Kennedy, really caused some concern to say, wait a second, now the day-to-day management of the building, not even the policy, is being overhauled here, and we don't know what's next. And it's the second part of that statement that causes some concern. We don't know what's next. Who's going to actually be appointed to come in and run the day-to-day operations for essentially the agency that is America's face to the world, our boots on the ground in countries around the world where we do not have troops, where diplomats are doing really important work. When there is a hiring freeze right now that stops them from bringing in new hires, when there's management being cut off from the top down, it causes real concern. And the White House would say, look, we're going to staff it up. A lot of these people were political appointees who had to leave anyway, so they're not concerned.
Finally, Margaret, as we saw in the interview with ABC, the president is continuing to stand by his claims about widespread voter fraud, with an executive action expected perhaps Friday or Saturday. What could that action entail, and what kind of position would that put lawmakers in potentially?
Well, we don't know yet. We had been expecting an executive order today. That seems to have been pushed off. The White House says, the president likes to be really hands-on with these executive orders and actions, and that he wants to directly weigh in on all of this. So some of it's subject to his own schedule. But with the voter fraud claim, remember, this is something that, while it is a very widely accepted principle that, yes, there is some voter fraud out there, that this has happened for decades. There are people who have served jail time because of that. But the thing that is a problem here with the 2016 election is the type of widespread voter fraud that Donald Trump blamed for his loss of the popular vote to Hillary Clinton would be on a scale unseen before in this country. That would really suggest some severe problems with our election system and the fairness and the accuracy of the reporting. And so the facts that have been presented so far don't back that up. The White House is very sensitive about that. They say, look, we're going to launch an investigation to try to see what the facts are, but you can't out of hand dismiss it. But what we know is election officials have, the statewide election officials have told CBS News they don't see any evidence of this. And Donald Trump's own lawyers filed suits saying they saw no evidence of voter fraud.
All right, we will wait to see what the details of this forthcoming executive order are. Margaret Brennan at the White House. Margaret, thanks.